We are so excited to have Jeff Seibert with us this episode. Jeff is the CEO and co-founder of Digits. Prior to Digits, Jeff was the head of product at Twitter until 2015, and then they raised $100 million for Digits to go revolutionize accounting. In this episode, we talk about everything from how to actually build AI models and experiences, Jeff's lessons from Steve Jobs when he worked at Apple, and how Jeff blows up his engineering teams every 4 weeks to make sure they're working on the highest impact thing. Cannot wait for this episode. Jeff, we are so excited to have you on AI Product Kitchen.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
It's been a huge week for you. Tell us the product world what this week's been about for you.
It has. This has been the culmination of literally years of work. So I started Digits in 2018 with the vision of modernizing accounting software and basically making small business startup accounting real-time, intuitive, collaborative. We were basically in stealth mode for 5+ years. And then we spent the past year testing what we had built with hundreds of startups in the Bay Area. And we just launched it on Monday at HumanX in Las Vegas. And we have basically launched Digits, which is the first end-to-end accounting platform of the AI era. And so the big difference, like what that means, is in QuickBooks or in Xero, you're spending hundreds of hours setting up rules, booking transactions, like all the tedium over the course of each year. And Digits does it for you. We auto book 93% of transactions perfectly accurately. And so the rest are then surfaced for you and you review them and so on, and it just saves countless hours for you and your team.
That is incredible. Let's go right back to the start. 2018, that's what, 5 years before AI was hot?
Yes.
What actually gave you conviction then to actually make this bet? And I think what you said, everyone was focused on crypto at the time. That's fascinating.
Yep. So Digits was my third company. I had started a document collaboration company called Encreo way back in 2007-08. We got acquired by Box in 2009. I started Crashlytics in the mobile developer tools space in 2011. We got acquired by Twitter in 2013. And with both of those, I'd sort of trying to ride a wave, right? It's like originally Web 2.0, and then it was the mobile wave. And so when we were thinking about starting Digits in late 2017, early 2018, it was like, okay, what wave do we want to bet on? And we actually spent a month in crypto because everyone was spending a month in crypto. And so I wrote a Bitcoin blockchain parser in straight C so I could understand every single field of that spec and what it did. And I basically concluded it was garbage. It was terrible technology. It was worse than MySQL as a data store in every way, except maybe trust, but there were limited use cases for that. And so we sort of decided to buck the trend. And we were like, you know what? Let's ignore crypto. Let's lean into machine learning, which is really interesting, and start hiring machine learning engineers. And maybe we can use this to fix accounting. And so we got very lucky with that bet. I mean, the fact that this became this whole AI hype wave has been incredible for us because we've been working in the space for 5-6 years.
Killing products is such a skill, right? You were in stealth for literally 5 years. Talk us through like this decision. What is stealth? Why did you decide to build in it? And what did that mean for the company as a whole?
Yeah, I think it really depends what industry you're going after. In general, I would say most founders should not go in stealth mode. It's not helpful. And it's because you learn so much by talking about what you're doing and getting all the customer feedback. It's way easier to just iterate in public and build quickly and delight folks than to be in stealth. We realized for this industry, it was a different story, right? Nobody is going to use a half-baked accounting platform. And so you either do the full thing or you don't, right? Like the job to be done is do my accounting, not like, oh, it sort of works in these cases. And if you look at the history of the accounting industry, it took Intuit 5-ish years to build QuickBooks back in the late 80s, early 90s. It took NetSuite 5 years to build NetSuite back in the late 90s. It took Xero really 5 years to get to market with a full-fledged product. And so we knew it was just a crazy long build. And there wasn't a lot of point in sort of telling the full story of what we were doing in the middle of that. It's like, let's go heads down and build this thing.
Talk us through the other scenario. Like when does it actually make sense to build in public, get customers in the door, get that feedback loop going? Like, yeah, what would your advice be to founders when they figure out which path to go down?
So I would say for the vast majority of other circumstances, like my default would be to build in public. Yeah. And I think you just learn so much more and you're able to get to market obviously faster. And it's just like you de-risk having built something that you knew the market wouldn't need, or maybe you didn't match their expectations or something. And so again, I think it's very industry specific. Our bet with Digits was like, we knew what accounting software looked like. We knew the market is truly massive. The US accounting industry is $200 billion alone each year. And so if we built something that did the job and was sort of 10x better in terms of automation, thanks to the AI, we were pretty confident the market existed for that. I will say one caveat. We weren't just like heads down silent for 5 years. We launched a couple little tools. And so people sort of were like, oh, wait, what's Digits doing? We launched a reporting product. We launched a transaction review thing. We launched an expense dashboard. And these were all pieces of the ledger. We just never revealed that we had built them all together as a ledger.
Interesting. How did you know that this is the way to launch it? Like, what did that look like from a bigger picture perspective?
You mean this week or prior?
Yeah, like you could have, I imagine there would have been like points on the journey where you're like, do we launch, do we not launch? Like, how did you know this is the one to make like a big splash?
Yeah, this was sort of the grand unveil of telling the full story. So before that, basically a year ago, we revealed pieces of what we have built in the context of full service accounting. So a startup founder can sign up for Digits, we will do your accounting, and we just happen to be using our software, right? And through that, we learned a ton over the past year and made massive improvements to the product and filled in all the gaps so that we had an end-to-end ledger story. Now, the software is mature enough where you can use it yourself. And so the big milestone we hit this week was you can go and sign up for Digits, connect your accounts, enter your credit card, and you're off and running. And if you're running a small business and Digits does 90+% of it for you automatically, you can do your books in a few minutes a month, right? It's incredible. And so that was the quality bar we wanted to hit. Once we got there, we were like, okay, it's time to launch. Now we can like tell this full story.
Accounting is a space where there's been like multiple generations of people trying to solve this problem. Why do you think now is the time to go really solve this as a whole?
Yeah, it has to really do with technical evolution. So the biggest frustration in the accounting industry, and I think a lot of startup founders, small business owners will resonate with this, is the month ends, you're sitting there waiting 2 to 3 weeks before you get your finances, right? And so what struck me is in my prior startups, the difference in data quality between product engineering and the business and finance side, right? On the product engineering side, you have Grafana, A/B testing tools, Google Analytics, all these live performance dashboards that are effectively real time, and they're effectively free, right? And you just have feeds of data coming at you. And on the finance side, you're waiting 2 to 3 weeks to get a black and white Excel sheet or PDF of your balance sheet and income statement, and it costs you like $1,000, right? Why? And there's a lot of people are like, oh, accountants don't know what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. No, accountants are super smart, right? Super hardworking. The software they're using is terrible. And so that's what we realized. That's when we decided like we have to start Digits and go deep on this. And if you look at the history of the accounting profession, it's been done on pencil and paper for hundreds of years, right? Originally started thousands of years ago. And then the first accounting software happened with the advent of computers and mainframes in the 60s, 70s. And then it went on to the personal desktop with QuickBooks and Quicken in the late 80s, 90s. Then it went into the cloud with NetSuite and Xero. So there's always been a platform transition that shifted the whole industry. And our bet was AI is going to be a platform transition for the accounting industry that will disrupt what ledger people are using.
Talk us through how you've actually built the AI product. I think you said you have 18 in-house models that you've developed. That is insane. And so I'd love to hear like, why did you build 18 and what trade-offs did you make or decisions that you go through to not use general off-the-shelf models?
Yeah, so I have a fun story for you. We have a patent on self-improving regular expression models. What this means is literally regex, and the regex self-learns and adds on to its regex to better match transactions. This was back in 2018, 2019. Completely obsolete. Like there is no reason you would ever do that today. But in 2019, that was the state of the art. That was the best thing available. And so we started building our own and training our own deep learning models, like predictive machine learning models, back in 2020. And that's when we started making real progress towards booking correctly. Because the way to think about the accounting problem space is you have transactions coming in from your bank, credit cards, payroll, payment processors, right? You have invoices, contracts. These all need to land in your ledger, and so need to land in a double entry chart of accounts. And you want that to be automatic and correct, because if it's not correct, the books are useless. And so we started training all these predictive models to predict where in the chart of accounts it would land. Then go back 2+ years, GPT-3 comes out, we start having these concepts of large language models. They can raise the sort of floor and provide this baseline knowledge of like what is what. So it's like, oh, Starbucks is probably meals and entertainment, right? Because these LLMs have an inherent knowledge of like what a Starbucks is, right? And so what we've been pushing on though is these LLMs are terrible at business specific accounting. So they will say, oh, Starbucks is meals and entertainment always. Well, that is not probably always true. And every business's chart of accounts is different. And so how do you book it in their chart of accounts versus a generic one? So what we really ended up pioneering over the past 18 months is combining the LLMs with our custom predictive models. And so right now, if you just ask GPT-4.5, like the state-of-the-art model, to do your books, it'll get about 65% right, which is nowhere close to good enough, right? If you ask Digits, it's 93% right. And so that delta is basically us using the LLMs for their broad knowledge. We have 17 other models effectively that we've trained that really add the precision and accuracy that you need to do it correctly.
How did you even define what good enough? Is that customers leading you? Is it your own definition? Where does that bar come from?
We had always had this intuition that the bar is 90%, right? If you can automate 90% of the bookkeeping, that structurally disrupts the accounting industry, right? It takes an accountant from being able to handle 10 clients a month, which is the industry status quo, to 100 clients a month. And so that 90% was always our bar. And we always felt that like the theoretical maximum was probably around 95% because accounting is super complex and arcane and you're never going to get it exactly right. What's been really interesting is we got stuck at the 90% bar for about a year. And we're like, okay, maybe that's like as good as we can get. And then we just had a bunch of breakthroughs this fall and early winter where now we're reliably at 93%. We've actually seen for a couple businesses, we can hit 100% accuracy based on given a couple months of training data for them. And that's insane, right? Like that means your books are never touched by a human. They're then reviewed by a human CPA and they're completely correct. And so I don't think we'll be able to achieve that for everyone anytime soon, but I do think 95% is probably like reliably within reach.
What advice would you give to other product teams or product leaders in figuring out, like, do I build my own models in-house? Do I go use off-the-shelf LLMs? Yeah, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think this is really interesting for all the founders out there trying to figure out what they build and how they build a defensible moat. If you're just handing data to GPT or Llama or Anthropic or whoever, what is your moat? And the moat better be a really proprietary data set or access or workflow or something. I've always pushed to go beyond that. And it's like we should own and control our own IP. And now we have these models that nobody else has. No one else in the accounting industry can get anywhere close to where we are in accuracy. And that's our durable advantage. So I do really look for businesses where you can sort of defend a moat in a durable multi-year way.
So your main moat you would describe as the model side of things?
100%, 100%. And I guess I've always been biased towards businesses that have a deep technical component. So to flash back to Crashlytics for a moment, we did mobile crash reporting. We intentionally never open sourced the core crash reporting code that detected the crash and figured out what line of code was the issue. That was our core IP. And that was some of the most complex code I have personally ever written that we've had folks ever work on. Like we had to re-implement malloc in iOS in order to do it correctly. And no one in now 10 plus years has ever been able to replicate that.
Talk us through the actual user experience that you've built. You mentioned it almost is invisible to the actual user itself. Where does the human actually come in and co-pilot versus where is it just automated or on autopilot, I guess?
Yes. So if you think of the business owner, the founder, right? What do you want? You want to understand your business, right? You don't want to spend time doing the accounting or bookkeeping, like actually running the business, sorting out the finance of the business. That is the worst part of having a company. And so what do you want? You want to come and log into a dashboard and be like, oh, there's my cash flow, here's my profit, here's my revenue, here are my top customers, here's my top spend. That's weird. Why are we spending on that? Maybe I should look into that. And so we designed Digits first and foremost to be an analytics dashboard for your finances. So you can log in and immediately know what deserves your attention. In order to do that, we have all the AI working in the background, booking the transactions, analyzing the activity, detecting trends and insights and so on. And then we surface anomalies to you. And so there's an inbox experience where when you log in, we'll be like, hey, we booked 90 transactions, whatever it is. We need your help on these 5. And the transaction is surfaced to you. And it's like, hey, we think this might be office supplies, but maybe it isn't. Can you help? Right? And so you can just click and pull down in the drop down and be like, nope, that's this. And the moment you do that, the models learn and will mimic you as the next transaction comes in. So it's a really fast way to train the AI. It's meant to just do the job for you rather than being something you have to like manage or oversee. And I think there's a lot of other products where the chat interface is probably too far forward, too prominent. Like, I don't want to chat with the AI. If the AI is so smart, why isn't it just doing the job for me? And so that's what we've tried to hit.
So where does this lead us in terms of replacing versus augmenting? How do you think about that sort of debate? I've seen so many different tools that go for like a direct replacement of an engineer. Then I've seen tools like Cursor that we are giving the existing engineers superpowers. What
Yes.
sort of stance have you taken here?
Yes, it is 100% augment and accentuate and sort of 10x. If you look at the accounting industry, they are in a catastrophic talent crisis. So CPA enrollment's down 33% since 2016. 75% of current accountants plan to retire in the next 10 years. Like, the industry is somewhat trapped. And Gen Z, for better or worse, doesn't want to be an accountant. And you can sort of understand why. And so they're actually looking to this technology as their savior, because when you meet with accountants, they actually don't like the accounting, right? Like, that's the worst part. It's actually quite tedious. They love working with clients, advising the businesses, analyzing the strategic plan, like trying to be value add, right? And so our entire story to the industry is with Digits, we'll do 90% of the bookkeeping labor for you. That elevates your team into more of a reviewer mindset, an advisory mindset, and you can really move your firm to an advisory business, which is far higher margin, more strategic, more interesting work anyway. And so what we've seen is we're not replacing any accountants. We're allowing them to survive and serve more clients and do the work they actually want to do.
When you think about developing AI products, what would you say is one thing that teams are getting wrong when they actually build or think about building AI products today?
Interesting. I would say putting the AI to front and center, as I sort of hit on. Like, I think a lot of companies are being started because this is AI for this. And I think we're losing sight of the problem a bit, in the same way with the crypto hype wave. It was all of a sudden crypto for everything. And I was like, that doesn't solve the problem, right? Like, focus on the problem first. And if you happen to need crypto, okay. If you happen to need a database, great. If you happen to need Redis, great. If you happen to need AI, great. And so use the models and the technology for like where they are needed versus creating your whole story around like, this is an AI for X, when I may not actually need that or want that.
Yeah, let's go a little bit deeper on that. There is a whole sea of noise out there. It's AI for X, as you mentioned. How would you say you differentiate between something that's actually moving the needle forward, the true innovation, versus noise?
I look for a real depth of technology. And this is probably my bias, but I want to see the team doing something really unique with the capabilities, layering on their own IP, their own approach to model training, their own care for how the data is treated. Like, the big flags to me are when a founder pitch deck is like, we are AI for X, we use GPT, here's the data we send them. I'm like, this is not an interesting business. It's just, it won't be a durable product.
So when you think about how fast AI models are evolving, they're becoming faster, better, cheaper.
Yeah.
What do you think about as the sustaining advantage for you guys? How do you make sure that you don't become obsolete?
So this is actually one of my great question. The better the models get, great. The better Digits will be at categorizing your transactions. I actually think the AI in the end game will be the least interesting part. And what I mean by that is, yes, the AI needs to work. You also just need to build really good software. Like, it needs to be easy to use. It needs to surface the data to you. You need to be able to collaborate with your accountant. You need to have all the right notifications and security settings and email preferences. Like, you still need to do a lot of like traditional software systems engineering to make a great product. And you need the AI to be good. And so the better and faster and cheaper the base models get, fantastic, right? Like, then that whole part of the product will get better and faster, but like, you still have to build the rest of the product.
Who do you take inspiration from? Who do you actually look up to? Who inspires you every day?
Oh man, a couple of companies that I think have gone really deep. So like, I would call out Figma. It is a tour de force of engineering, right? Like, and it's such a simple product, and you do your design in your browser. If you look at how Figma actually works, it is insane. And they had a similar story. They went heads down for something like 5 years. And then it's, of course, been an overnight success. And so like, that's really inspirational.
Talk us through some of the non-conventional team structures you have. I found it very interesting. You mentioned the word blowing up engineering squads to make sure you're working on the highest impact thing. Like, how have you actually structured the teams at Digits to go after this?
We do a lot of maybe unusual practices geared at making the company really agile. And so just a few things just to level set. We started fully remote in 2018, way pre-COVID. We've been fully remote ever since. We will never have an office. There's never been an office to go back to. And I did this for a very simple reason, which was at Twitter, I was head of product. I had teams in 11 offices all around the world, across all sorts of time zones. And there was so much internal drama and overhead from that it was such a waste of time. You had different cultures in different offices. Different offices fought with each other over which projects they got to work on. They felt the need to fly to San Francisco to be heard. They wanted me to come visit them. All of it makes sense. None of it benefits the customer at all, right? And so we were like, okay, we need Digits focused purely on delighting customers, no offices, right? I didn't want anyone to feel like a second-class citizen. And so as a result, you then have to design the whole company around the premise of being remote and how do you make that sustainable and enjoyable. And so I do an all hands every 48 hours, and I have for 6.5 years, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we run the entire company on a weekly sprint. And so Monday morning, I gather everyone and here are the goals for the week. Wednesday, it's check-ins. All the teams share an update on their goals and who needs help, what's going well, not going well, et cetera. And then Friday, we do show and tell, literally kindergarten style show and tell. Everyone shows off what they built. And then it starts all over on Monday. And so it creates this very high-pace, agile culture where, let's say something happened in the market and we want to shift priorities, or we had some big customer have an issue, we'll shift priorities on Monday, right? So we can pivot the company in a lightweight way every single week. The next layer of that is how do you organize teams around that? And so the challenge traditional engineering orgs have is the success and size of your team is largely determined by how good your engineering manager is at hiring, right? If they are good at hiring, they get good engineers, they get a big team, they get more sway, they get these projects. And if your engineering manager, unfortunately, isn't very good at hiring, your team sort of withers. And each team ossifies where it's like, here are the leaders of the team. These are the people that speak in all the meetings. These are the people that don't really say anything and don't get to work on the cooler stuff. And so it just creates an unhealthy culture over time. And so we decided way at the beginning that we would not have fixed teams and we would plan our work around our priorities. And as the priorities change, the teams would change. And so what this looks like today is we do weekly sprints that all net up to planning cadences we call horizons. We call it the horizon because it's literally as far as we can see. And that happens to be about 4 weeks right now. So we plan in maybe month cycles. And in each horizon, we decide these are the top priorities. Okay, what teams do we need to tackle those priorities? Great. Who do we want on each of those teams? And so if we don't need a team for the next horizon, we blow up that team and the folks go and join other teams. And it actually creates this amazing dynamic where you get to work all across the product over time. You get to work with different folks across the company over time. And it creates this really collaborative mindset.
Where do product and engineering fit into this, or product and design?
So product and design basically follow these teams. And so each work stream, what we call them, has a PM, has a designer. Those PMs and designers will move around as the work streams get created or folded. And the key thing is each engineer has basically 2 coaches. So you have your coach who's coaching that work stream, and then you have an individual coach who is responsible for your personal career and one-on-ones and sort of the more traditional management things. They stay with you no matter what work stream you're on. And so there's no reorgs, your one-on-ones never change. You work with them on your career and you work with your work stream coach for the obviously projects of the week and so on.
And talk to me about how PMs actually do their work. Are they actually in the models? Are they building? Where does their role start and finish?
So our approach to PMs is very inspired by my time at Apple. Every company in Silicon Valley has a totally different approach to product. And so this might resonate, this might not. We take a very design-centric view, and we actually don't have a separate product team and a separate design team. We only have 2 teams. We have engineering and we have product design. And it is PMs, designers working together. And everything we do is design first so that we know what the end-to-end experience is. Then we can do a technical architecture around, okay, how we're going to build that. And then we actually build it. So for our product managers, it's very much what is the user experience? What problem are we trying to solve? What are the actual pixels, like them working with the designers to map out the entire flow. And then what's the high level tech we would need to like achieve that? And then the engineering team is like, great, okay, let's now with that vision, figure out what we can achieve, what we build, how it works, how it's architected, et cetera.
Where does the go-to-market motion fit into this? Is this something PMs are thinking about? Is it a separate function? Like, how does that actual life cycle?
So this is new for us because we just launched on Monday. Yeah. So we are actively working on our go-to-market motion and how we do launches. For this launch on Monday, it was literally the entire company coming together. And so we ran launch review meetings, I think like twice a week since January, to make sure all the pieces were falling into place. And it's amazing how many different things you need, because you need a bunch of BD partnerships. We have a technical white paper. We have a launch video that was coordinated with an external producer. We have all, of course, the marketing website and assets. We, of course, have all the product features. So we really treated it as like a whole company initiative. Now that we're out publicly, for smaller launches, we do need to set up what our launch program looks like and who's running each launch and sort of how product marketing works in there. So that'll be an evolution.
Do you think a lot about enterprise motions versus self-serve? Where do the actual motions themselves fit into this?
Yeah, so my just natural bias is to make stuff as self-serve as possible. My first company was self-serve SaaS way back in 2007. Crashlytics was completely self-serve and predominantly free. You just signed up and used it. And so that's definitely our bias here, is making it as easy as possible for the business owner, for the accountant to just sign up and serve their clients.
So you were head of product at Twitter in 2015, right? I'd love to hear some of the lessons there around what actually shaped how you actually build AI products and teams today.
So Twitter was really the second public deployment of machine learning technology, to my knowledge. Facebook was the first. When they ranked their news feed in 2013, 2014, I believe that was the first widespread deployment of machine learning. And then Twitter, of course, quickly followed, and we had to rank the timeline and so on. And it's really interesting to sort of think back and realize how opaque it was. Like back then, no one really knew how the models were working. Only a couple engineers were really skilled enough to train the models and like iterate the models and improve them. There was a lot of debate around what data they should have access to and what they couldn't use and so on, and what the negative repercussions would be. And so it was definitely an early training ground. I would say it's amazing how much has evolved since then. And now you have all the folks in college studying machine learning and AI. Everyone can play with it and try out these models for free and open source. So the barrier to entry and adoption has just plummeted, which is amazing.
When you reflect back on Twitter, it obviously has so much data available. Like, what would you say some of the things that you did well in going after AI opportunities, and what do you think some of the things that could be improved in hindsight?
Oh man, I'd say, largely everything could be improved. We had very few use cases for it. It was like we ranked the timeline. That was all the effort. Did we use AI, ML anywhere else? Not really, right? And so now it's a whole mindset shift of like, it can optimize onboarding flows. It can, of course, do user notifications and data analysis, and all these different things. And so it's just, yeah, it was primitive at the time.
You've spoken about your time at Apple in the early days and really the influence Steve Jobs had on you. Can you tell us about some of the principles that you've brought through his influence and his work into your day-to-day?
Yeah, so I had the privilege to work at Apple back in 2006 as a summer intern. And my dream, my like childhood goal growing up had always been to work for Apple. I was just obsessed with the company and their attention to detail and design and everything. And when I got there, it was very impressive and also surprising how traditional it was, how top down it was, how as an engineer, like you only wrote code, you had almost no access to anything else. Even as a summer intern, I had a full office with a door. And when you were working on something confidential, you had to close and lock your door. And everything at Apple is confidential. So everyone all summer had their doors locked. And so it was this very isolating experience. Of course, in 2006, way before Slack or any like office communication tool. And so I would see the team I was on once a day at our stand-up. And the rest of the day I was in my office coding. But you did appreciate just the intensive focus on user experience. And at that time, Apple was effectively run by HI, Human Interfaces, was the name of their design team. And the purpose of HI was basically to interpret Steve's desires. And so he would give them feedback and direction, HI would implement it, And then that would be sort of waterfall approach delivered to the engineering teams. And it would be fascinating things. Like some would be obviously usability and features. Some would be Steve no longer likes blue. This was one of the mandates we got. And so HI spent a week or two that summer removing blue from the UI of Mac OS X. This was, of course, it had started in the Aqua interface, and now it needed to be less blue. And we got new pixel mocks. I was on the mail team, the email client. We got new pixel mocks of like, here's the UI with less blue, make it happen. And you had to go through and make those changes. And then HI would screenshot your work, overlay it onto their design, and circle anywhere you were a pixel off. Totally insane. We got another mandate of like, the new version of Mail must look like iTunes 8. And we were like, great, okay, what does iTunes 8 look like? Oh, that's right, you're not allowed to know that. Okay, so, and then a few weeks later, we got a new mock, and we're like, well, I guess there's resemblance to iTunes 8, we don't know, but we'll make this. And so there were pros and cons. Like I would intentionally never run a company like Apple was at that time, but there were aspects of it that were super powerful that we've carried through. And so that's why like our product design team is design first. That is why we're so focused on just insane sort of minimalism and ease of use and simplicity in the product and hiding all the technical work sort of behind the scenes. Like the product should just work. And it guides a lot of our just way of like how we think about customers and value their experience in the product.
Can you give me like a specific example of maybe a product decision you've made? I remember we were having a conversation before and you said perhaps the lean startup movement is hurting product teams more than
Yes.
benefiting them. And where has this come out like in a more specific example of your day-to-day?
Yeah, so ever since the lean startup movement came out, I think a decade plus ago now, I've not been a fan of it and have not followed it. And I'll go back to an example from Crashlytics. So it's a mobile crash reporting product. It was a native SDK. You put it into your app. That's it. It just sits there silently until your app crashes. And then it tells you through our web service what line number of code you need to fix. Super simple product, right? On its face. It only did one thing. And the lean startup movement would say, okay, build that as a prototype, get it out to developers, iterate based on their feedback and so on. And we could do that, but Apple wouldn't do that, right? And I had always been obsessed with like, how do you shape everything as a full product experience? And what would a developer tool look like if Apple had made it? And I will caveat, Xcode is largely terrible, so don't actually follow how Apple makes developer tools. But like, how could we package this up? And so back in the day, this was back in 2011, to install an SDK in an iOS app was a huge pain. It was literally a 30-step wiki. And so one of our competitors did have a crash reporting analytics SDK that you followed their 30-step wiki, and like half an hour later, it was in your app working. And my co-founder saw that and was like, this is insane, right? Like no one's gonna do that. How can we make this easy? And he challenged me and asked, okay, of these 30 steps, how many could you automate? And I looked at it and I was like, given enough time, all of them. And so it was like, okay, we're doing that. So we spent 2 months building the product. We then spent 9 months, dark, pre-launch, building the installer. And what we ended up shipping was actually a Mac desktop app that all you did was drag and drop your Xcode project file onto it, and we just configured it for you. And so it turned our onboarding from a 30-minute, 30-step wiki to literally seconds to deliver delight. And so the competitor was out in the market. We weren't first to market. We launched and literally blew them away within days because the delight delivered in that moment just was better than anyone had ever seen, anything anyone had ever seen. And so they then told all their friends about Crashlytics. It was like that was the hot developer tool at that moment in time. And that's why I've always felt like you should launch a great product, right? It's so easy to build a bad product now. There's so many products out there. It's so hard to get attention. If you're going to do all the work, like make it great and then launch it.
There seems to be a recurring theme around like what's actually required to leapfrog competitors. And it keeps coming back to like obsess over the product, which may mean going to the dark for multiple years. Is there anything else that comes to mind for you in terms of like how you actually take market share from someone who might be doing a really good job previously?
So it is really hard. For someone to switch off their current product to you, a new upstart, it has to be 10x better, right? In some way they care about. If you make something that's the same or like slightly better, they're going to be like, oh, why would I bother switching? Because the mental switching cost is massive. Even if you try to make it easy, there's still a mental barrier to switching because they need to relearn the tools and there might be bugs and there's uncertainty and nobody wants that because they're busy with other things. And so I've always felt that your product has to be 10 times better than anything else that's out there in the market. And you should really challenge yourself and your team on like, what about our product is 10x better? And so that was our whole premise with Digits. It's like, yes, we have to build great accounting software and we need all the ML to work so that the bookkeeping is literally 10x better. Like it takes 10 times less time for you to do. And I think we've hit that bar, and like that'll be the market will be the judge of that, right? We've either hit that bar or we haven't.
What's another product belief that you have that others in the industry might disagree with you on?
Oh man. I mean, that's probably the big one. The other one I'd call out is basically an obsession over speed. So many products feel sluggish to use. And even like relatively well-known products, I won't call out anyone by name here, but like relatively popular, well-known products feel sort of sluggish. Like there's a second or two delay when you're trying to take actions in the product. And I think that just creates this mental overhead, this cognitive load of like, this product's like not great, right? And if you can introduce something to the space where it is instant, it's very subtle, it's very subconscious, but you have this very positive sort of impressed response to the product. And so that's been something we've spent a ton of time on. We load every dashboard page in Digits in sub 100 milliseconds. Versus if you are browsing QuickBooks, it takes a couple seconds to load every page. And when we demo it to accountants, at first they don't really pay attention to that. And then a few minutes into using the product, they're like, this thing is incredibly fast, right? And it just is like another way to sort of shock them into being like, whoa, this is legit. Like, you know what you're doing, you've built the right thing, you've built it the right way. And it's just a really impressive product experience.
A lot of people would struggle to prioritize something like speed or performance, which you've identified as like a key value prop against the incumbent, which is QuickBooks for you.
Yep.
How do you think about prioritization in general, and more broadly, bigger vision and going after that versus like defensive prioritization, or like things that a customer might churn as a result of? Like, how do you think about prioritization?
Really great question. So I think a lot of people stress over feature comparisons and like, oh, the competitor does XYZ, I need to do XYZ. And if you're in that battle, you're sort of already losing because you're constantly going to be chasing what their next feature is. The way I like to think about it is you're going to need to land, call it 80% of the table stakes features, right? Like if you don't have the basic table stakes features, you're not going to be a product in the space. But instead of stressing about the remainder, then pour all your remaining energy into one or two killer features, right? Like what is your major differentiator? And I think if you can tell the story of we have this major differentiator and we have like 80% of the rest that you're going to need, then you have a really great story to the market, and you can always fill in remaining gaps over time.
If you think about your customer, true product scale, in 5 years, what would you say one thing accountants are doing today that will be just so obviously archaic?
Yes, so the accounting industry is fascinating. The job is more tedious than you would probably ever imagine, and accountants spend most of their time collecting data. And so when you think of accounting, you're like, oh, my bank feed and my credit cards, right? That's only a piece of it. You need to book payroll. You need to book all your cap table changes, maybe out of Carta or Pulley. You need to book all your outstanding invoices, contract commitments, right? Appreciations, depreciations. And so it's all this data coming together. And then they have to reconcile all of it. And so then you need the bank statements and so on. And so today, you might be able to get a transaction feed out of Plaid, right? There's no way to get your bank statements in an automated manner. And Plaid has an API for it, but basically no bank supports it. The reason for this is no one's motivated to make this data super accessible, and we haven't done the automation work to make that easy. And so if you think about it, a great opportunity for AI is how do I go and perform these workflows on an accountant's behalf? In 5 years, there is no way accountants are going to sit there and have to log in to your 20 different financial providers to download all the data they need, right? Like an AI should do that for them. What's interesting about that problem space is banks have spent 30 years defending against bots, right? And now I'm like, wait, no, actually, I want this bot to go and be able to log into my bank and pull my bank statement and then just auto-reconcile all my data, or book my payroll, or find all my open invoices and, right, like update those correctly. And so we need a way to unlock the authenticated web to AI agents. And I think that'll completely change the industry in the next 5 years.
How do you think about which customer personas to go after? Accounting is a huge industry, right? Like there are
Yep.
specific subsets that you've gone after, and more importantly, like who have you decided is not your customer right now?
So if you look at the accounting industry, you have the big four, which everyone's aware of, and then you have a massive long tail of 40,000 firms in the US, right? And the 40,000 are the ones serving most of the small businesses in the country. And then the way you break down firms is a bunch focused solely on sort of bookkeeping, right? A bunch focus on accounting, which is the next level up, which is like, okay, how do we understand the business and manage the business correctly? Then there's a whole bunch of firms that focus on tax as their specialty, and a whole bunch of firms that focus on audit. And the technologies needed to automate those are actually quite different. And so we've been really focused on the accounting and bookkeeping segment, which is broadly called advisory services, right? Like that's understanding the business and advising the business. Tax and audit would be future pieces to go into.
What are you most excited about the next year?
Getting Digits out there to everyone. And so we just launched on Monday. You can go check it out at digits.com, sign up, link your bank accounts, cards. We'll do your bookkeeping for you. The next big chapter is getting it out through the entire accounting industry. And so we're already trialing the product with two firms. Armanino's a massive top 20 firm. Highline's a really tech-forward modern firm out of New York. And so they're already trialing our ledger with clients. And we will have more news for the accounting industry in the next few months of how they can start using it with all their clients.
That's so exciting. Thank you so much for coming on, Jeff.
Thank you so much for having me. This was super fun.